The morning sun hit the windshield of Bus 47 at exactly 7:43 a.m., casting long shadows across the cracked vinyl seats. Marcus Chen, the bus driver for 15 years, had seen plenty: rowdy teenagers, crying kindergartners, forgotten lunchboxes, but he'd never seen Karen Mitchell storm up the center aisle like a hurricane in designer sunglasses. "Excuse me?" she shouted, her voice cutting through the morning chatter like a blade. "Excuse me!" The bus fell silent. 32 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Marcus recognized her immediately. Karen Mitchell, mother of Sophia, 8th grader, quiet kid who usually sat near the back. He'd driven her for 2 years without incident. But the woman advancing on him now looked like a completely different person, face flushed, jaw clenched, fingers curled into fists. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked carefully, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. His stomach tightened. He'd learned long ago that these situations could escalate fast. "Is there a problem?" Karen's laugh was bitter, sharp. "Is there a problem? My daughter just told me she's been sitting next to Derek Paulson for the last 3 weeks. 3 weeks? And you?" She pointed directly at Marcus. "You did nothing. Derek Paulson, 14. Behavior issues." Marcus had noted the seating chart, made sure Derek was always in the front section where he could monitor him. But he'd also assigned him a seat partner, Sophia, because she was quiet, wouldn't provoke him, and the pairing had seemed harmless enough. "Mrs. Mitchell." Don't Mrs. Mitchell me." She took another step forward, her Gucci handbag swinging dangerously. "My daughter felt uncomfortable. She said he made comments. Inappropriate comments, and you, a grown man, let it happen." The other students were absorbing every word. Some of the younger kids looked genuinely frightened. A girl in the 3rd row was recording on her phone. Of course she was. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He'd been doing this job for 15 years. 15 years of dealing with difficult parents, mechanical breakdowns, traffic nightmares, and the constant low-level stress of keeping 30 kids safe every single day. He was tired. And this accusation, thrown at him like a weapon, felt like a punch he didn't see coming. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to step back and lower your voice. There are children on this bus." "Oh, now you care about the children?" Her voice went higher, louder. "Where were you when Derek was making my daughter uncomfortable?" "What exactly did he say?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his tone level. "That's not the point." Karen's hand came up, and for a moment it looked like she might actually grab him. Several students gasped audibly. "The point is, you failed in your responsibility. You're supposed to protect these kids, and instead you're just sitting here day after day, letting predatory behavior happen on your watch." Predatory behavior. The words landed like acid. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. "Your daughter never reported anything to me," he said quietly. "If there was a problem, I needed to know about it. She's 12 years old. She shouldn't have to report it." "You should be paying attention." The bus had become a pressure cooker. Marcus could feel the eyes on him, judging, afraid, recording. He thought about Derek, who had a learning disability and a home life that was complicated at best. He thought about Sophia, sitting somewhere near the back, probably mortified that her mother was screaming about her on a packed school bus. And he thought about his own kids, about how fast a misunderstanding could become an accusation, how fast an accusation could become a reputation, how fast a reputation could become your entire life. "I'm going to need you to have a seat or get off this bus," Marcus heard himself say. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now, an edge he immediately regretted. "Excuse me?" Karen's eyes widened. For a moment, something flickered across her face, genuine shock that he would push back at all. "You're disrupting the route. If you have concerns, we can discuss them after I drop off the students. But right now, you're frightening children who aren't even involved in this conversation. I am the mother of one of those children, and I am the driver. And I'm telling you that this conversation needs to happen somewhere else." Karen's mouth opened, closed. Her face went from flushed to absolutely purple. She turned and walked toward the back of the bus, muttering words that no one could quite hear but everyone could feel. Marcus pulled back onto the street, his hands gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles went white. In his side mirror, he caught a glimpse of Sophia's face, utterly devastated. sinking lower in her seat as other kids stared at her. The rest of the morning route passed in tense silence. But Marcus didn't know what was coming. He didn't know that Karen Mitchell had already called the school superintendent. He didn't know that she'd told Sophia to write a formal statement. He didn't know that, by the time he arrived at the depot for his lunch break, his supervisor would be waiting for him in the lot with a grim expression and a folder in his hands, and he definitely didn't know that the security camera, mounted above the rear exit, the one that had malfunctioned 6 months ago and was being replaced this week, had captured everything. Every word, every gesture, every moment of what had actually happened. The footage would surface 2 days later, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. The suspension letter came on a Tuesday. Marcus sat in his apartment, the official letterhead trembling slightly in his hands. He read it 3 times, hoping the words would change. That somehow his brain was misprocessing what his eyes were seeing. Effective immediately. Pending investigation. Allegations of negligence and failure to report concerning behavior. Do not return to duty until cleared. He sank onto his couch, the letter falling to the floor. 15 years. 15 years of perfect attendance, of safety certifications, of parent commendations, of kids hugging him at the end of the school year. Gone. Just like that. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife, Patricia. "I'm seeing posts about you. What's happening?" He didn't respond. By Wednesday morning, it was everywhere. Local news outlets had picked up the story. School bus driver under investigation after parent reports negligence. The comment section on the school district's Facebook page had exploded. People he'd never met were calling for his termination, his arrest, worse. A few parents he'd actually driven for came to his defense, but their voices were drowned out in the noise. His sister called. His mother called. His best friend Derek, ironic name, he thought bitterly, showed up at his door with beer and pizza, but Marcus couldn't eat. Couldn't even pretend to want company. Meanwhile, at Riverside Middle School, the situation had taken on a life of its own. Sophia Mitchell sat in the principal's office for the 3rd time in 2 days. Principal Davidson, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and an increasingly exhausted expression, reviewed the statement again. "So, Derek made comments about your appearance?" she asked gently. Sophia nodded, not meeting her eyes. She was miserable. She hadn't wanted any of this. She'd just mentioned something to her mother, something stupid that Derek had said, something about her hair, something that hadn't even bothered her that much, and suddenly it had become this massive thing. What kind of comments, specifically? Sophia's cheeks burned. He said my sweater was distracting. That's all. It was stupid. I told him to stop, and he did. Principal Davidson wrote something down. She looked troubled. Your mother said there were multiple incidents. There weren't really, just small stuff. Typical 7th grade boy stuff, honestly. The principal set down her pen. Sophia, I want you to understand how serious this is. What you've reported could have significant consequences for Mr. Chen. I want to make sure we have all the facts. Sophia felt something twist in her stomach. She liked Mr. Chen. He was nice. He always asked how people's days were. He let kids plug in their phones at long red lights. He'd helped her classmate Tommy with his anxiety by letting him sit closer to the front of the bus. I don't want him to get in trouble, Sophia said quietly. But your mother filed a formal complaint. The district has to investigate. I know, but Mr. Chen didn't do anything wrong. He was actually really fair about Derek. Principal Davidson leaned back in her chair, and for a moment, something like understanding flickered across her face. Why don't you go back to class, Sophia? We'll be in touch. The girl left, and Principal Davidson sat alone in her office, staring at the statement. She'd been in education for 37 years. She knew how these things usually went. She also knew what the security footage showed, because she'd already seen it. The IT director had flagged it that morning, the backup from the rear camera that was being decommissioned. She'd watched it, then immediately forwarded it to Davidson with a subject line that said simply, "You need to see this." The footage showed everything. Karen Mitchell boarding the bus, yes. Yelling yes. But it also showed Derek sitting quietly, never having said anything inappropriate to Sophia that morning. It showed Sophia looking up at her mother with an expression that was part embarrassment, part resignation. It showed Marcus calmly attempting to de-escalate, a situation that didn't need de-escalating because there was no actual problem, and it showed the exact moment when Karen's hand came up and she reached toward Marcus, a gesture that could have been interpreted as threatening, that in a different context might have been called assault. The footage was time-stamped, irrefutable. Davidson had 3 choices. She could release it immediately and vindicate Marcus. She could sit on it and let the investigation play out. Or she could use it strategically, which meant she'd need to talk to her superintendent, who would want to talk to the district's legal team, who would be very concerned about liability. The bureaucracy of it made her tired. She'd already called Karen Mitchell's husband, a man named Robert who seemed genuinely shocked by his wife's actions. He'd apologized profusely and asked if there was anything he could do. She'd asked him to encourage his wife to speak with the superintendent's office to clarify what she meant by her allegations. But what she really needed was for this to blow over quickly, quietly and fairly. That afternoon, Derek Paulson was called into the counselor's office. He sat in the chair across from Mrs. Reeves, confused and defensive. "Derek, I wanted to check in with you about something. How have things been on the bus with Sophia Mitchell?" Derek's face went blank. "Who? Sophia Mitchell? 8th grader. You sit near her?" "Oh, yeah, I guess. She's quiet. We don't really talk. Has anything happened between you two that you think I should know about?" Derek shifted in his seat. He was a kid who'd been labeled problem since elementary school, and he'd learned to be suspicious of questions from adults. "Like what? Did she say something?" "I'm asking you, have you said anything to Sophia that might have made her uncomfortable?" Derek thought about it. He genuinely couldn't think of anything major. "I mean, I made a joke about her sweater once, but that was like a week ago and she laughed." "It wasn't even mean," Mrs. Reeves made a note. "What did you say about her sweater?" "Just that it had that weird texture like those bumpy things." "Corduroy, I was just making conversation. Kids make jokes all the time." "And she laughed?" "Yeah. She didn't seem upset." The counselor nodded slowly. Another piece of the puzzle. Not a smoking gun exactly, but evidence of how quickly context could be stripped away. How easily a casual comment could become an indictment when filtered through the lens of parental anger and institutional liability. By Thursday, rumors were everywhere. The local news showed up at the school. Social media had split into factions, some people defending Marcus fiercely, others demanding his immediate arrest. A few online voices suggested that Derek might have been framed by Sophia, which sent her into a spiral of guilt. The adults in charge were all holding their breath, waiting for the legal department's guidance, and Marcus was sitting in his apartment, refreshing his email obsessively, checking his phone for calls that weren't coming. He had a hearing scheduled for the following week. The union representative had advised him to say nothing, to let the evidence speak for itself. But Marcus didn't know about the security footage yet. As far as he knew, it was his word against hers. As far as he knew, his career was over. On Friday morning, his phone rang. It was his ex-wife, Patricia. "Have you checked the news?" she asked without preamble. "No." "Why?" "Turn on Channel 7. He did. The headline made his breath catch. "School bus driver cleared in viral video. Parent faces questions." The security footage was being released. The anchor explained, and it showed a very different story than the one initially reported. It showed no evidence of inappropriate behavior by Derek Paulson. It showed a driver attempting to manage a disruptive passenger professionally, and it showed a parent who may have escalated the situation significantly beyond what was warranted. Marcus watched the footage, watching himself from an external angle for the first time, and he felt something between relief and rage. Relief that he'd been vindicated. Rage that it had taken this long, that his reputation had been dragged through the mud, that an innocent kid like Derek had been questioned and implicated. But there was something else too, something darker. He watched Karen Mitchell's face as she yelled, watched her hand come up with that aggressive gesture, and he realized that she wasn't going to face any real consequences. Maybe some social media backlash. Maybe a conversation with her husband. But nothing official, nothing legal, nothing permanent. Meanwhile, his suspension would be lifted, but everyone would still remember the accusation. Parents would whisper. Kids would know. The narrative of his guilt had already been written in people's minds, and a video, no matter how clear, couldn't completely erase it. That evening, Derek Paulson's mother came to pick him up from school. She'd heard the news and she was furious, not at Marcus, but at Karen Mitchell for putting her son through questioning and scrutiny he didn't deserve. She pulled Derek aside. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," she said. "Adults can be pretty messed up sometimes." Derek just shrugged. But something had shifted in him too. He'd been labeled the problem once again, temporarily. And even though he'd been cleared, he knew how easily it could happen again. By Saturday morning, the story had mostly run its course. News cycles are short. Karen Mitchell's lawyer had released a statement expressing sincere apologies if there was any misunderstanding, and the district was already drafting its official response, which would carefully dance around admitting liability. Marcus received a call from his union representative. His suspension was lifted, effective immediately. He'd be paid for the lost days. The district was con. Karen Mitchell didn't sleep Friday night. She lay in bed next to her husband Robert, staring at the ceiling, listening to him snore softly beside her. Her phone sat on the nightstand, face down, but she could feel it there like a physical presence. Every notification, and there were dozens, felt like an accusation. The comments had started around 6 p.m. when the news broke. By midnight, they'd evolved into something darker. This woman is a menace. She almost ruined an innocent man's life over nothing. Karen Mitchell should be arrested for filing a false report. I hope her daughter never forgives her for this. She'd made the mistake of clicking on her Facebook profile around 2 a.m. Someone had created a post titled Karen Mitchell, Riverside's most dangerous parent, and tagged her in it. The comments were brutal. Parents she'd known for years, women she'd invited to book clubs and dinner parties, were calling her a liar, a narcissist, a threat to the community. One message stood out, from a woman named Jennifer Martinez, whose kid was in Sophia's grade. My son said Derek felt like everyone was staring at him yesterday. He was humiliated because of your lies. I hope you're proud of yourself. Karen had felt physically ill reading that. Now, in the gray light of Saturday morning, she sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Robert had already taken Sophia to her soccer game, a decision they'd made together, but that felt like an escape to Karen. He hadn't said much since the news broke, but she could feel his disappointment like a weight in the house. Her phone buzzed. Another message. This time it was from the school. An urgent meeting with Principal Davidson, Sophia, and her parents, scheduled for Monday at 2 p.m. The subject line simply read, Student Welfare Check-In. Karen's stomach dropped. They were going to ask her to apologize. Publicly, probably, in front of everyone. But the truth was more complicated than that. She pulled up the security footage on her phone again, watching herself storm onto the bus, watching Marcus's face, watching the moment she reached toward him, and she realized for the first time with absolute clarity that she'd been wrong, not just about Derek, about everything. The previous Wednesday, when Sophia had mentioned that Derek made a comment about her sweater, Karen had felt something ignite inside her. It wasn't really about Derek's comment. It was about everything. It was about the fact that her daughter was growing up, that boys were noticing her, that the world suddenly felt dangerous in a way it hadn't before. It was about Karen's own fears projected onto a harmless situation, and instead of talking to her daughter about it, instead of asking questions, instead of handling it like a rational adult, she'd decided to go to war. She'd pumped Sophia for more details, leading her, putting words in her mouth. Did he make you feel unsafe? Did his comments seem predatory? How many times did this happen? And Sophia, sensing her mother's intensity, had started to believe that what had been a minor annoyance was actually a major problem. Karen had done that. She had created the narrative, then acted on it. The doorbell rang around noon. Karen opened it to find a woman she didn't recognize, holding a small camera and a microphone. Mrs. Mitchell? I'm Jessica Hernandez with Channel 7 News. We'd like to get a statement from you about Karen shut the door, but the damage was already done. By Sunday evening, there were news vans on her street. Her neighbor, Tom, had actually confronted her while taking out the trash, asking her if she felt any shame. Shame. As if shame was even a big enough word for what she was feeling. Monday arrived gray and cold. Karen sat in the car outside the school, trying to compose herself before going in. Her hands were shaking. She'd drafted an apology a dozen times, each one feeling inadequate. Inside Principal Davidson's office, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sophia sat between her parents, looking absolutely miserable. Marcus Chen was there too, standing to the side with his union representative, a sharp-looking woman in a gray suit. Karen's heart lurched when she saw him. The man she'd publicly accused, whose reputation she'd damaged, standing right there, Principal Davidson started. "Thank you all for being here. I wanted to bring everyone together to address this situation and make sure we move forward as a community." She paused, looking directly at Karen. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think you have something you'd like to say." Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out at first. She looked at Marcus, and she saw something in his face that broke her completely. Not anger exactly, but something sadder. Disappointment. The expression of a man whose faith in fairness had been shattered. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry to Mr. Chen. I'm sorry to Sophia. I'm sorry to Derek. I made accusations without verifying them. I let my own fears drive my actions, and I created a situation that hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt." Marcus didn't respond. He just stared at her with those tired eyes. "I spoke to Derek's mother," Karen continued, "and I learned that my accusations caused him to be questioned and made to feel like a problem when he hadn't done anything wrong." "That's on me. That's all me," Sophia spoke up quietly. "Mom, I need you to know that I never told you Derek was being predatory or anything. I just mentioned he made a joke, and you pushed me to say more." Karen felt her face flush. Her own daughter. Even she understood. "I know," Karen said. "And I'm sorry for that too." Principal Davidson nodded slowly. "Mrs. Mitchell, I want to be clear about something. What happened on that bus was captured on security footage. That footage has been reviewed by our legal team. We've determined that there was no negligence on Mr. Chen's part. In fact, his handling of the situation was professional and appropriate." She paused. "However, your actions, both the public accusations and the formal complaint, have caused significant harm. To Mr. Chen, to Derek, and frankly to the school community." "What does that mean?" Karen asked quietly. "It means," Davidson continued, "that we're recommending the district file a report with the county about this incident. False accusations have consequences, Mrs. Mitchell. They undermine trust in our safety systems. They make it harder for us to address real problems when they occur." Karen felt the room tilt slightly. "Are you going to press charges?" "That's not our decision. That would be up to Mr. Chen and potentially the district's legal team." Everyone looked at Marcus. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "I don't want to press charges, but I want something understood. What you did wasn't just wrong. It was dangerous. To me, yes, but also to the culture here. Because the next time a real problem happens, parents might be less likely to report it. Kids might be less likely to come forward. And predatory people will know they can operate because trust has been broken." His voice was steady, but Karen could hear the pain underneath it. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, Marcus continued. "I've built my reputation on being someone kids can trust, that parents can trust. You took that from me. And yeah, the video clears me. But in people's minds, I'm still going to be the guy who let something bad happen. I'm still going to be labeled. That doesn't go away." He looked directly at Karen, and she couldn't look away. "So no, I'm not pressing charges. But I think you need to understand what you actually did." The silence that followed felt eternal. Robert put his arm around Karen's shoulders, but she felt him flinch slightly, as if he wasn't sure he should be comforting her. Sophia looked like she might cry. Principal Davidson was making notes on her pad. Marcus and his union representative stood up. "If we're finished here," he said to Davidson, "I'd like to get back to my regular route tomorrow." "Of course," Davidson said. Thank you for being here, Mr. Chen. And again, I apologize for the disruption this has caused you. As Marcus left the room, Karen felt something break open inside her. This was real. This was actual. She'd tried to destroy a man's reputation over nothing, and the only thing stopping him from destroying hers in return was his own integrity, his own refusal to stoop to her level. The meeting ended shortly after. As Karen walked out to the parking lot with her family, she saw other parents watching her, some with disgust, some with something that might have been pity. Robert didn't speak to her on the drive home. Sophia stared out the window, and Karen realized that she hadn't just damaged Marcus's life, she'd damaged her own, and she wasn't sure it was repairable. That night, she sat alone at the kitchen table with her laptop. She composed a long public apology and posted it to Facebook. She tagged Marcus Chen, Derek Paulson's family, and Principal Davidson. She detailed what she'd done, why she'd done it, and she acknowledged the real harm she'd caused. Within an hour, the comments started coming in. Some people accepted her apology. Most didn't, and she understood why. An apology, no matter how sincere, couldn't undo the damage. It could only acknowledge it. She also received a private message from a woman she didn't know, Jennifer Martinez, Derek's mother. The message was short. Thank you for the apology. Derek's having a hard time. He thinks everyone hates him. If you want to actually make this right, you'll help us make sure nothing like this happens to another kid. Karen read it 3 times. She had no idea what that would even look like. But she knew one thing. She was going to spend a very long time trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, across town in his small apartment, Marcus Chen sat on his couch and watched the security footage one more time. He'd been vindicated. 2 weeks later, Marcus returned to Bus 47 like a ghost haunting his own life. The first morning back, he arrived at the depot at 5:30 a.m., an hour before his shift. He sat in the empty driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, trying to remember why he'd ever loved this job. The bus smelled the same, that particular blend of vinyl seats, cleaning solution, and the faint metallic scent of brake fluid. But everything else felt foreign, unsafe. His supervisor, Bill, had tried to make it easy on him. "You're a hero, man," he'd said that morning, slapping Marcus on the back. Everyone knows what really happened. But Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who'd been publicly eviscerated and then glued back together with the expectation that he'd be grateful for it. The kids started boarding at 7:10 a.m. For the first few stops, Marcus felt every eye on him. Elementary school kids whispered to each other. A few gave him sympathetic smiles. Others seemed unsure, as if his recent notoriety had made him unpredictable. By the time he got to Riverside Middle School, his jaw was clenched so tight his teeth ached. Derek Paulson boarded at his regular stop. The kid looked at Marcus with an expression somewhere between gratitude and wariness, the look of someone who'd been collateral damage in someone else's war. "Hey, Mr. Chen," Derek said quietly, taking his usual seat in the front section. "How are you doing?" Marcus asked, and he meant it. "Okay, I guess. Everyone knows my name now for, the wrong reason." Marcus nodded. He understood that better than anyone. It'll fade. People move on to the next thing, but even as he said it, he wasn't sure it was true. Some things, once they're out in the world, don't fade. They just recede into the background, waiting to be dredged up at the worst possible moments. Sophia Mitchell boarded at the next stop. She was alone, which was unusual. Normally, she traveled with a group of girls. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. When she saw Marcus, her entire face flushed crimson. "Hi, Mr. Chen," she said, barely audible. "Good morning, Sophia," he replied, his voice neutral. She slid into a seat 3 rows back, away from Derek, away from everyone. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen like it was the only real thing in the world. The bus filled up. The route continued. But something had fundamentally shifted in the ecosystem of Bus 47. The easy rapport Marcus had cultivated over years was gone, replaced by an awkward awareness that something had almost broken here. Something had almost broken everyone. That afternoon, Marcus's phone rang. It was his ex-wife, Patricia. "I'm taking you to dinner tonight," she announced without preamble. Don't argue. 7 o'clock at Rosario's. Pat, I'm not really... 7 o'clock, Marcus. You look like death, and you're driving a bus full of kids. We're going to have a conversation about what happens next. He showed up at 6:55 p.m., still in his work uniform, too tired to change. Patricia was already seated at their old table, the one by the window where they'd spent so many evenings when things were still good. She looked older than he remembered, or maybe that was just what knowing someone for 2 decades did to you. You can't keep doing this, she said before the waiter even brought water. Doing what? This, she gestured at him, at his entire being. Martyring yourself, playing the wronged victim. You're walking around like someone who's already dead. I was suspended based on false allegations. I was humiliated publicly. Forgive me if I'm not throwing confetti. I'm not saying your feelings aren't valid, Patricia said carefully. I'm saying that you're letting this destroy you in a way that the actual situation didn't. The vindication happened. You won. So what are you going to do with that? Marcus didn't have an answer. He spent the dinner picking at his pasta, listening to Patricia talk about her life, her new boyfriend, a pleasant accountant named David, her plans for the future. She was moving on. She had the luxury of perspective. I talked to a therapist, Patricia said as they were leaving. Not about us. About grief. And one thing she told me stuck with me. Sometimes the trauma isn't the event itself. It's the fact that we didn't get the ending we deserved. We got a resolution, but not the ending we built in our heads. That's very therapeutic of you, Marcus said, but without real bite. I'm serious. You wanted people to understand that you did nothing wrong. You got that. Now you're waiting for the next thing. Maybe an apology, maybe punishment for Karen Mitchell, maybe for everyone to just collectively decide that you're a good guy. But none of that's going to happen because life doesn't work that way. They stood in the parking lot under the streetlights, the October wind making Patricia hug herself. What are you saying? Marcus asked. I'm saying you need to decide if you're going to move forward or if you're going to let this incident define the rest of your life. Because those are your only 2 choices. He drove home in silence, Patricia's words rattling around in his brain. Meanwhile, across town, Karen Mitchell was discovering her own version of reckoning. She'd started volunteering at the school, a decision she'd made after Derek's mother challenged her to actually make this right. What she'd discovered was that making things right was infinitely more complicated than making them wrong. She was working with a program called peer support, helping to train students on how to recognize concerning behavior and report it appropriately. The irony of it wasn't lost on her. She was now educating the community about exactly the kind of mistake she'd made. It was humbling work. And painful work. One afternoon, she was leading a workshop with about 20 8th graders. A girl raised her hand and asked, So like, if a teacher or bus driver does something that makes you uncomfortable, you should tell a trusted adult, right? Right, Karen confirmed. But what if the trusted adult doesn't believe you? What if they tell you you're overreacting, like what happened to Derek? The room went quiet. Everyone was staring at Karen. A few with sympathy, most with a kind of careful neutrality that was probably worse than outright hostility. Karen took a breath. That's an excellent question, and I'm the person who should answer it. My name is Karen Mitchell. Some of you might know that I recently made a very serious mistake. I accused someone of inappropriate behavior without verifying my claims first. My daughter didn't even tell me anything inappropriate had happened. I led her to believe that something minor was actually serious. She could feel the eyes on her, the judgment, the scrutiny. But she continued. What I learned from that mistake is that accusations are powerful. They can hurt people. So if someone doesn't believe you the first time, that doesn't mean you stop. It means you find another trusted adult, a counselor, a parent, another teacher, the police if necessary. But you don't give up, and you make sure you're telling the truth. A boy in the back raised his hand. Do you feel bad about what you did to Mr. Chen? The question hung in the air. Karen could have deflected, could have said something corporate and measured. But these kids deserved honesty. Yes, she said simply. I feel terrible, and I don't think I'll ever stop feeling bad about it. I hurt someone who didn't deserve to be hurt, and I undermined trust in the very systems that are supposed to keep kids safe. That's a serious mistake with serious consequences. After the workshop ended, a girl approached her, Sophia. She looked nervous, which made sense. This was the first real conversation she and her mother had attempted about what had happened. "Hi, Mom," Sophia said quietly. "Hi, sweetheart. How was school?" "It was okay. Listen, I wanted to tell you, I know I'm not the only one who's been hurt by this, but I also want you to know that I forgive you. I know you were scared. I know you were trying to protect me. You just did it in a really wrong way." Karen felt tears starting. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I know you are. But being sorry isn't the same as being okay. You still have to actually do the work to make it right." 12 years old, and her daughter was more emotionally mature than Karen had been at 38. When had that happened? 3 weeks after his first day back, Marcus Chen received an unexpected visitor at the depot. Derek Paulson's mother, Lisa, showed up with a homemade lasagna and a folder. "I wanted to bring this to you," she said, handing him the folder. Inside were letters, dozens of them. From parents, from students, from people in the community who'd seen the footage and wanted to express their support. "Thank you for handling that situation with such professionalism. My kids trust you completely because of how you've treated them. You're the kind of adult we need more of in this world." Marcus read through them, feeling something crack open in his chest. Not the painful crack of the previous weeks, but something different. Something healing. "Why are you doing this?" he asked Lisa. "Because Derek needed to see that there are people who do the right thing. And because you did. You could have been angry. You could have pressed charges. You could have made this about revenge. Instead, you handled it with integrity." She paused. "Also, I wanted you to know that Karen Mitchell is actually working with Derek now. Real conversations, real attempts to understand what she did and why. I'm not going to say I forgive her completely, but I see someone genuinely trying to change. And I thought you'd want to know that." After she left, Marcus sat in his bus with the letters, reading them one by one. And he realized something. The narrative hadn't stayed fixed. People had moved beyond the initial accusation. The footage had done its work. The truth had actually won, even if no